You're listening to Halftime with your host, Mylan Bittenbender, where each week we take a few minutes to step off the field of life and discuss the challenges and joys of navigating life in the middle years. I hope your time with us today will help you develop your strategy for a winning second half. Welcome to the locker room. You're among friends. Today, I get to introduce you to Robin Shear. Robin and I met about 15 years ago. I was a youth pastor at a church in Adrian, Michigan, and she was leading the youth in her church in the area, and we were part of a youth leaders co-op, I guess you'd call it. We got together periodically to work together on projects, to pray, to encourage one another, and that kind of thing. And so we met each other then, lost touch for several years, and then just recently reconnected after I saw some of the things on her social media about her new business. She's a joy coach. She's written a book. She's done some public speaking. And today we're going to talk about all of that and Robin's pursuit of joy through some of the craziness of midlife. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Robin Shear. So, hey, Robin, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for coming and being a part of my podcast, this show. Welcome to Halftime. And thank you so much for being willing to give us a little bit of your time today.
I'm so glad to be here with you, Mylan. And I'm just going to cue the audience in right now. The reason that you asked me to be on Halftime is because you know that I have such a wide background in professional sports. And I know that your focus of this halftime thing is sports related. And now the agents are going to come after me again. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Are you thinking about repacking your cheerleading career or?
No, actually, the only sport I ever qualified for.
Yeah. Were you in any other sports growing up?
Oh, no one asked me to play, like in gym, they line up and choose. No, I was the last one standing.
In my younger years, I was the last one picked as well. I know that feeling. I know that feeling well. So yeah, actually you kind of nailed a point. We do want to make sure right up front, people know that this is not a sports oriented podcast. This is all about midlife. And so I appreciate you. Now, I know you're close to my age. Do you mind discussing your age? I know you're never supposed to ask a woman her age.
We're just calling in the three things you don't ask a woman, right? Like age, weight, and hair color.
But you are in midlife, correct?
I am. Oh, yeah. Yes, I am very much in midlife. I'm 52.
Okay.
So yeah, that definitely qualifies.
Yeah. Yep. Well, thank you for being vulnerable. And actually, we're going to talk a little bit about vulnerability because you get really vulnerable in your book. And we're going to unpack that later. We're going to talk about your book. I'm so excited for your book. Congratulations on getting that out. I've never released a book. I've thought about it, never gotten there. Who knows what God has in store. But we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about just life growing up and what it means to get to this point in our lives. And then what do we do in this point in our lives, transitioning, moving forward and preparing for what could be our golden years or could be our gravel years, kind of depending on how we live it out. But I'm excited about this conversation today and really appreciate your friendship and your willingness to jump in and share your thoughts, your ideas, your insights with us today. So tell us a little bit, rewinding, tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up. What was Robin Shear's childhood like? What was it like growing up being you, and where did you grow up and just kind of some of those things?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in a tiny little town, less than 1,000 people in the village, and so we all knew each other. And it was just a real comfortable place. It was a supportive environment. I was raised by a single mom who was a high school teacher in the special ed department, so she worked so hard. And we learned from the get-go, my sister and I, that life is about giving to others and just meeting the needs of others with whatever you've got. My mom modeled that from the very beginning. And so, I've always admired her for that. We went to church in a town that was nearby. It became our second home. We were there so often. And so we've got this beautiful community. And I still live in that same community. I've
Wow.
basically lived here my whole life outside of college and the first couple of years of marriage, but so
Yeah.
yeah, they can't get rid of me.
Yeah. So at the age you disclosed earlier, you probably, for me anyway, growing up, I remember the 80s. The 80s was kind of my sweet spot. I like to take a few minutes of nostalgia on the show because I think a lot of people are kind of in the same boat with us. What do you remember from the 80s? What stood out to you? What kinds of things did you enjoy from that era? What kind of iconic things does your mind connect with?
Wow, I mean, you might not get me back out of the 80s.
Uh-oh.
This I should warn you 'cause that's my happy place. I mean, it was just where we all kinda
Yeah.
came to life
Yep.
if you were born in this era. So, when I think of the 80s, I think of things like friendship bracelets and, those little pins that girls used to make that we would
Oh,
put
yeah.
on our shoelaces with all the beads. I think of, like, 80s big hair bands, Def Leppard and Bon Jovi and all of those. I mean, I knew every song they ever made and then some. I think of roller skating
Mhm.
on Sundays. We would just go to the matinees and just spend a couple of dollars, and we went every single Sunday. It was just a big part of what we did. Drive-in movies were a huge thrill. We didn't get to go very often, but I totally remember just packing as many kids into the back of my mom's station wagon as we could fit before seatbelts were really that important. And I don't even know how we survived the 80s sometimes when
Oh,
I think
yeah.
about it. But yeah, and like food that you don't really hear a whole lot about. I was thinking about this, and the one food that I really think about is Kix cereal. Before they changed the formulation, and all of a sudden it tasted really sweet, and I didn't
Yeah.
want to eat it anymore because I wanted the old version of Kix. Just the simple things. Yeah. How about you? Like, what comes up for you when you think about the
The
80s?
opposite when it comes to the kicks. I liked the new, improved, sweeter version. I have a
You can have this.
terrible sweet tooth, and which has plagued me all my life, still does. But yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of the bands that you mentioned, absolutely. Casey Kasem in the top 40, loved all
Yeah.
of that. Loved, I mean, just the whole high school thing, and there's something about that era, and of course, every generation. That's the era that you know. Who was it that sang "Glory Days"? About
Yeah. Bruce
Bruce
Springsteen.
Springsteen,
Totally.
yep, and,
Yeah.
those are the kind of the
Perfect choice.
glory days, and it's interesting, this whole halftime midlife thing. We talk about different stages of life. We're gonna talk about that today, and
Mhm.
there's the kid years. There's the years where you're just this innocent kid running around the house, and you remember your family and little things and fun things and cute things that you were a part of as a kid, and then, the
Mhm.
coming of age, your teenage years and college years and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the career and
Mhm.
family years, and the craziness of just the adrenaline rush of going, building, 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 and blossoming into
Yeah.
this. We think we're blossoming into something, and then all of a sudden we hit our midlife years and we realize, wait a minute. A
Mm.
lot of this stuff that I've been shooting for, aiming for, pushing for, going for is all of a sudden not what I thought it was, or I've got big questions about
Mhm.
it. Am I moving in the right direction? Is this sustainable? And, all of those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And so we hit midlife,
Yeah.
and kind of hear the screeching on the pavement, sort of in some ways. So anyway, but yeah, for me, all that 80s stuff, sports and being super, healthy and feeling indestructible and all of those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And now here we are in midlife going, no, we're definitely destructible. So,
It reminds me of that scene in 17 again with Zac Efron,
mm,
where he, goes back and is the younger version of
yeah.
himself, and he jumps off of the upper level and he crashes and he's like, "Wow, I feel amazing." Don't we wish?
Yeah. Now tell us a little bit about, I talked a little bit about the years where we're building a career and a family and all of that kind of stuff. Just give us just a real brief, about your family and your career and that kind of stuff up to this point.
Sure. Oh, those were great years. I got married young. I was 22. My husband at the time was 25 at that time, and we just dove into married life. This was right after college. And, we bought a duplex and, just kind of decided what we wanted in life. And a few years later, we started our family. And, so I was balancing motherhood and being a wife with trying to work a little, but not too much. I wanted to be present for the kids, but I had a lot inside that I really wanted to contribute to the other world, not just like the two kids inside of my
Sure.
building.
Yeah.
And so I worked part-time. So as a dietitian, I served in different capacities at that time and really loved it. I love that balance of being with adults and being present for my family. And those are just beautiful years.
Yeah.
I
Good
love
for you.
thinking about those years.
Good for you. Things have changed a little bit. Now you're a joy coach. And in your
I
book,
am.
you explained that you kind of coined the phrase. Tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
joy coaching and I'm always fascinated. Like I'm moving into a coaching career as well. I'm beginning to do some
Yep.
coaching and some things like that, and I'm always fascinated about what people will pay to be able to achieve goals that they would like to get in a professional
Yeah.
that they would hire to walk with them to achieve those things. Tell us
Mhm.
a little bit about joy
Mhm.
coaching and what that looks like.
I'll be honest with you, Mylan. The joy coaching thing was not something that I ever imagined
Mhm.
happening in my life. I have only met one other person who calls herself a joy coach. So it's not like it was a dream of mine at all.
Yeah.
And I loved being a dietitian.
Mm.
And then I transitioned into youth ministry, which I loved. All these things I felt like I was called to do. And when they came to an end, it was a struggle because
Mm.
I felt like I was failing. What happened? Why am I not still serving in that capacity? And when I realized that I had been unofficially coaching in all of the things that I had done, it became clear to me that I wanted to learn how to do it properly so that I could help people.
Yeah.
And I wanted to help them from a place that I knew, from a part of life that was very real to me,
Yeah.
something that I had seen over and over again have true impact on people's lives.
Mm.
And it was the concept of mixing joy into what could be a big mess.
Yeah.
I worked with people with eating disorders and senior citizens who lived at assisted living places and teenagers who they had the weight of the world on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And when joy was added into their story changed.
Wow.
And the circumstances didn't always change, but their view of it, their approach, their outlook was different. And I wanted to take that and give that to the people that were coming into my path at that point in life. But I have to say that I didn't think of it.
Mm.
And this was something that came to me in prayer, in this room, actually. And I distinctly remember, that moment. And I'd love to say I embraced it and said, yeah, God, you're so smart. But I didn't. It was more like what you said. Who's going to pay for that?
Yeah.
Because we have it, right? Joy is a free thing.
Mm.
Why would anybody pay to learn about something? It's like a breathing coach. Why would you learn about that for money, right? But it's something that isn't always natural. We can have it naturally, but when we don't, and we need to learn how to cultivate it, that's where I come in because I know how to do it. I've seen it happen. And so, yeah, God put that idea in my heart. Took a little while for it to take off, but once it did, I could really see his hand at work. And actually the pandemic opened up just a few months later. And so God's timing, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, ministry is ministry. Coaching
Yeah.
can be, I think, should be a ministry. It's coming alongside people, and I've heard coaching described as being a thought partner. Somebody that comes along and says, "Hey, I'm going to think with you through this process to help you." First of all, understand your goals. I think a lot of us don't really understand our goals. We don't really take the time to nail that down and figure out what we really want in life. And then
And
being
why?
able to, and why, the big why, the intrinsic motivation, right?
Yeah.
For wanting to achieve certain things in life. And then how to get there. A lot of times we really struggle with
Mm-hmm.
that. We just need somebody else to kind of ask the questions and pull it out of us. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's beautiful. And I mean, as you're telling your story, I'm feeling a lot of the same things, right? I
Mm,
resigned from the church that we led a couple of years ago, and I felt that same
mhm,
thing, like, oh my gosh, a lot of failure syndrome, and yet at the same time, coming to terms with the fact that I've really always been a coach. I've always been coaching, I should say, and this is
mhm,
an opportunity to just kind of move in that direction a little bit differently. Um,
mhm. Make it more official. And can I just say,
yeah,
though,
yeah,
before
yeah.
you go on, that when I first met you and we were both serving in local youth ministry, I can confirm what you just said. You have always been coaching, whether officially or unofficially. I distinctly remember meetings that we used to have as youth workers in the area monthly, and we'd get together and encourage
Mhm.
and support each other. And you were the one, like when you spoke, I always paid attention because the wisdom, but also just I knew where that was coming from. We all knew who owned your heart, and we just absorbed that, and it did help guide our thoughts and our actions. So just to confirm, you were most definitely coaching even then.
Thank you, Joy. That or Robin. That's funny.
It
Yeah,
happens, huh?
people call
Oh,
you
check
Joy, don't they?
all the time. It made the book.
Yeah.
Keep it in.
Oh, but thank you, Robin, for those kind words, and I remember those days. That's how we met, back in Adrian. I was, youth
Yeah,
pastor at one of the churches there, and you were, leading
yeah,
the youth in your church, and, yeah, we had a great thing
yeah.
going there, and that was a
We
lot of fun.
really did.
So, good.
What a great community.
Well, I wanna talk about your book, Messy Joy,
Okay.
and, first of all, congratulations. It's huge to be able to
Thank
write a
you.
book, even just, man, getting that out of your heart and out of your mind, putting it, into written
Mhm.
form and being able to present that, to, a company, an editor, a publisher, and get it out and all that. I don't even know how that process works, but I'm always fascinated with it.
Me neither.
I that's funny to hear you say that because, this is a great book. And is this your first book?
Thank you. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
good, great job. But yeah, when I saw that you were doing that, of course, your social media, you've been, promoting this a lot. When did this book, hit market?
It was 2022 in
Okay,
December, right before Christmas.
okay,
Yeah, I had to think about it. That was a busy year. Both of our kids got married that year,
yeah,
and so it was all kind of swirly.
yeah.
But yeah, it was the same year.
About a year and a half ago, um,
Uh-huh.
and so I picked it up, and I got to be honest with you, some of it was very personal for me. I'm going to get into that a little bit later in the conversation.
Sure.
My own personal
Okay.
need for joy, and a lot of people think that I've got a lot of it, but not like I'd like to.
Mhm.
So I may be calling you about the
Mhm.
coaching thing as well.
You
Um,
are like everyone else and myself. We all need that help.
yeah. Well,
Mhm.
and it's not something that we get full of, and then we can just coast from there, right? It's something we have to
Right.
continue
If
to
only.
cultivate. Yeah.
Absolutely, like a gas tank.
Yep.
Mhm.
So first of all, I want to say thanks for your vulnerability in the book. That was one of the things I noticed right off the bat. It's a great read. It's a very easy read. It's a fun read. I love the little snippets you put in periodically that are like, Here are my side thoughts that I don't want to. They're not the book, but they're my thought." It was kind of cool the way you did that. I haven't seen that before.
Thank you.
Love that. So it made it a fun read, but a very it drew us into. Your heart, just what you're processing as, a human being. I think that's a lot of what we lose in culture right now, is just raw
Mhm.
humanity, who we are as
Mhm.
people. I thought your book did a brilliant job of that, but part of that was being really vulnerable. I mean, you talked about four pretty major struggles that you've had actually in the last, what, 5 years, 5, 6 years. You've
Yeah.
those
Yep.
those struggles have really culminated, and part of what really interested me as one who is kind of focusing on the midlife years is all of those struggles kind of came in the midlife season, and you've been working through
Mhm.
them as part of your own midlife. I'm not going to call it a crisis, um,
Nope.
but
Nope, just
but your midlife struggle, and
Mhm.
so you talked about, this foot pain that you endured,
Mhm.
a kind of an injury, but not a you didn't
Mhm.
fall off something and injure yourself. It was an injury that was more natural. You
Mhm.
talked about dealing with PTSD from when you were young, a major
Mhm.
head injury, concussion, and then
Mhm.
a struggle with candida and some things like that.
Mhm.
Um, and you talked a lot about the struggles of going through that and finding joy in those things. And what is interesting for me is in these middle years, and part of the reason I feel like this conversation is so important, or these conversations, is because I see people kind of sinking into despair as they go through the crisis part of midlife, or it
Mhm.
becomes sort of a rebirth. Um, Tell me from
Mhm.
your perspective how you view that process and
Mm.
what leads to uh, a rebirth as opposed to just kind of sinking into this whole I'm getting old, my life is winding down, and let's count out the days till it's all over.
That's such a great question. And to be completely honest, I think so often it's really a mixture.
Mm,
We would like to say we choose to not be in despair, and that we choose to see this as rebirth. And I don't really know anybody who has successfully just done the rebirth piece without the feeling of despair. I
mm,
think that is just part of humanity. It's just who we are. And yet, this is the good part, the and we can have that despair and those feelings of failure and disappointment, and is this all there is, and I thought it was going to be different than this. We can have that,
mm,
and we can have some direction that's different than that. We can use that to push us in a direction that we may never have gone
yeah,
had we not had all of that stuff in the background.
mm,
I think that we would love to have a really smooth path, and we think that some people do,
mm,
right? We
yeah,
see their stuff online and we think, wow, it must be great. But we are all struggling with some of this stuff. And so, number one, we can't assume that anybody has a perfect life. And number two, when we learn to embrace that those two things can coexist, I think it gives us a little bit of freedom to just be real
yeah,
and make progress at the same time. Because the last thing we need is to feel disappointed in our reaction to things, in our humanity. Let's be honest. Stuff is hard,
yeah,
and it does hurt. And if we ignore that and only focus on the trajectory and the goal, we're doing ourselves a disservice by not really healing and acknowledging what is over here. And the beauty is the mix.
mm,
Because if everything is always great and it's always a path toward goodness, are we really going to own that goodness? Are we really going to feel the depth and the beauty and the power of it if we haven't had some of the struggle and this garbage back here? I really think that's the beauty, is the mix. And that's the basis of messy joy. It's
mm,
not just joy. It's messy joy.
yeah.
It's like real life meets joy. And then what? It's about the and. It's about the and. Does that answer your
Oh,
question at
that's
all?
absolutely, yeah. And one of the things we all look to, like you said, people that seem to just have it all figured out or seem to skate through or whatever. But people that
Mhm.
are extremely successful, if you look behind the curtain on any of their lives, and if you read their books or read their articles about their life, or you'll find that every single one of them has gone through one of these very, very
Oh, yeah.
painful seasons. And
Very
and
significant.
so, as a matter of fact, this whole caricature of we have the person going through the midlife crisis who buys the fancy car and dumps his
Mhm.
wife and finds a younger model and all that kind of stuff, may
Mhm.
just be that person's way of trying to avoid the despair, the pain, going through the
Yep.
struggle, rather than simply embracing it and
Yeah.
kind of allowing the storm to do its thing. There
What
will be a
what if
storm
there's
ahead.
purpose?
What's that?
Mhm. What if there's purpose in it?
I
You know?
think there absolutely is. There is a deep purpose in it,
Mhm.
and I think it drives us
Mhm.
from this surface life. We talked about the 20s and 30s, this time of life where we're going and pursuing and building and creating and moving forward, and it's very external. We find that a lot of our life is very external. Um,
You're
and I
right.
think that midlife crisis drives us to really look inward, which is a scary
Mm-hmm.
place. A lot of people don't want to spend any time in there. But it
Mm-hmm.
drives us to that place of really looking at the condition of our soul and finding out who we truly are and working through, the things that are there. What are your thoughts
And
about that?
thanks be to God, like, I'm so glad that we get that opportunity. I'm not going to be Pollyanna and say it's easy because it's not, but
Yeah,
there's so much goodness that is waiting if we're willing to go there. Nobody signs up for a midlife crisis.
yeah,
And to be honest, I think we should probably rename that because crisis is only negative. We don't see that there's purpose in the word crisis. That just sounds like alarms are going off. There's an emergency. And if we view it that way, we may go off and buy, the Ferrari. But, if we view it as like an area of growth, of development, of finding ourselves, even in the midst of the mess, it really can be a time filled with purpose and joy,
yeah.
and one that we could be actually thankful that we experienced. I think it's really in the perspective and in the approach.
Yeah. And the way I view personally my faith, is that it's like God, and there's many scriptures that kind of allude to this, that's where God holds us strong, holds us fast, gives us a solid
Mhm.
foundation on which to
Yep.
stand through the storms of life, because they're going to come. And like you said, there's purpose
Mhm.
in them. And if we can really be anchored in our relationship with Christ, um, then we can
Mhm.
endure those storms knowing that they will pass and we're going to make it through and he's going to take care of us in the meantime. And I think it's important
Can I?
yeah, go ahead.
So sorry, but I think you're spot on. And we both share the same faith background. But
Yeah,
I think that you know when things are easy, when things are, externally looking great, we kind of skate through things, and we forget so often that we need that anchor. We need that rock. And, when we get to midlife and all of a sudden, almost everything begins to change.
yeah.
All the stuff that you thought you had control over, your health, your family life, how your parents are doing, your income,
Hmm.
just how you spend your time, your body, everything starts to change that you had control over. And you realize, wow, I really do need this thing that doesn't
Yeah,
change. I have to cling to the one thing that remains the same no matter what. And God showing us that He is still exactly who He said He was back when we were 25 and life was easy.
yeah.
He's the same God. There is so much joy
Mm.
in that. There's so much purpose. And that might be, I'm totally hypothesizing, but that could be the reason for the changes that we experience
Yeah,
in midlife.
yeah.
It points us back to what matters long term and forever, and not that temporary stuff.
I'm glad you brought that word up because I had it in my notes to ask you about later, control.
Okay.
Do you think it's in midlife where the illusion of control is really shattered? This control that we
Yes.
thought we had over so many things, and if so, what
Mhm.
is the relationship between control and finding joy? What are your thoughts on that? I'm
Well,
curious.
ooh, that's a great one. I can't remember what chapter it is. I think chapter 6 in the book, and it's at the part where I was working hard to recover from a really bad head injury. And, going to therapy and all this physical therapy and acupuncture. And I mean, it was like nonstop and it was not working.
Yeah.
And it was exhausting. And I was trying to control my outcome. And it got to a point one night laying in bed that it became so clear to me that by releasing control in prayer to God and truly submitting all that mattered to me into His hands,
Hmm.
completely releasing them with the understanding that he may leave things that way forever. My healing might be on the other side of heaven.
Hmm.
And once I got to a point where I was not only okay with that, but I was thankful for it. I recognized there is a God and I am not it. And by letting God be God and just giving this whole thing to him in prayer, everything that mattered to me suddenly, it was like the joy that I found and saying to God, you matter more to me than all of the stuff that I thought mattered so much. And letting go of control and submitting
Hmm.
was the thing that helped me to see that there can be true joy in the mess. I
Wow.
thought at that time that my head was not going to get better. I kind of stopped believing, and I was okay with it
Hmm.
because God was still good. And there was my joy.
Wow. We could just pause
Yeah.
there and just kind of,
Mhm.
allow that concept to just sort of um, move us, because I think all of us are struggling with something in life that we're disappointed with, frustrated with, isn't what we had hoped it would be, and are going to have to probably come to terms with the fact that that may or may not. Now, you did finally work through
I did.
physically,
Yeah.
and the pain
Yeah.
subsided, and you were able to get back to normal in that sense.
That
Um,
remains to be seen.
but and we saw that in COVID. We heard over and over again, there's going to be a new normal. Question is, how are we going to
Yeah.
be with that? And there are new
Yeah.
normals in, when all the kids move out, when we
Yeah.
all of a sudden our body begins to break down and we begin to have certain physical issues that we're dealing with, or you know um, you lose a job, or you get to the point where you wonder if this is what I'm really, if this is really what my life is all about. And those new normals, being able to find joy in those spaces, is so important. You may have been able to tell that this was not the end of my conversation with Robin. Actually, what happened is the conversation went well over an hour. It was just too much content for one episode. So, what I decided to do was split it into two episodes. This was part one, and next Monday, I will release part two of this conversation. There was just too much content, and it didn't feel like there was anything I could really cut out. So, we just decided to split it in half. In the meantime, I encourage you to go visit our Facebook group, and where you can engage in conversations and you can pick up on some resources and some things there. Also, want to encourage you to like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you are watching or listening to it, and also want to encourage you to share. You could share it in your own social media. You could share it in a conversation. Just tell your friends about it and invite them to come and listen and be a part of this conversation in the growing community around halftime, our own journey through midlife. I hope this episode has been helpful and encouraging to you, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. God bless.